I was advised years ago that trigger finger was more unsafe because of pressure forced into the first finger joint and the fact that you're then only using 3 fingers to grip. Do you have any input to this, please? Yes. This is one I've not heard before. Let's dive in. The first thing we need to understand is that the human body is incredibly adaptable. We can train it to sustain almost any position. Just look at professional athletes, circus performers, contortionists, elite level pole dancers. They're all doing insane things with their bodies. And whilst we can't prevent all injury, we can train ourselves to sustain some of these more riskier positions with time and thought. Another example of a common pole myth is that twisted grip is some evil, dangerous thing that no one should do. The reality is that if our students are strong enough and have the right amount of flexibility and prerequisites, that it's actually perfectly safe for a lot of people to do twisted grip. Demonizing certain positions isn't really ideal because there are as many variables as there are people. So why do a lot of instructors teach trigger finger, and is it safe? Trigger finger is where we take our index finger and run it down the pole in split grip positions. The idea behind it is that it puts the wrist into a more neutral position. As opposed to when we wrap the fingers, we start to take our wrist into ulnar deviation. So you don't need to remember that particular term, but it basically means that our wrist is slightly twisted. And we are at the end range of that joint. Now, whenever we're at the end range of a joint is when it is the most riskiest. Doesn't mean we never do it, but it does mean we need to be strong enough and flexible enough to sustain the position we're asking our body to do. When we're twisted like this, we are far more likely to injure tendons, ligaments, and other parts of our joint. So how likely are we to injure our index finger in a trigger position? I've personally never heard of this or seen this, so I don't think it's a very common injury. That doesn't mean it's impossible. I decided to do just a little bit of an experiment to see if I could find positions that would put more pressure or pain into my index finger. And this is what I found. So the first thing, if my arms are too close together, I do feel more pressure in the index finger. But I have a bigger problem first, and that's that this actually really hurts my wrist. The second time I found that I felt pressure was if I wasn't engaging my shoulders correctly. So when I'm just hanging off both shoulders, my body's coming into the pole, I can feel more pressure in the index finger. But if I engage my shoulders and become into a much stronger position, it takes the pressure out of my finger and I feel it more in the palm, but also I'm supported by my shoulders. And what about the extra grip we get from that finger if we wrap all of them as opposed to running that finger down the pole? Well, I don't think it's enough to justify the increased risk that we're getting through the wrist. And some studios and some instructors actually teach this with an open palm. So you don't even need to have any fingers on the pole whatsoever if you're strong enough, if you have a good arm position, if you're engaging through the shoulders in an effective way. Now, I don't do that as standard because there are some students who have hyperhidrosis or other similar conditions who may have good form, okay, maybe in a good position. They may be engaging their shoulders correctly. They may be really strong, but because of their hyperhidrosis, the open palm just means they lose a little bit of that extra grip that does tend to help them. So it's not something I would do as standard, but this can be a handy test to see if you do have a lot of the prerequisites that we should have for our split grip. Because the biggest issue with split grip is that it is taught way too soon. Ultimately, each position has its positives and negatives. Whether we decide that we want all of the grip from our fingers and we can sustain a more extreme wrist position, or whether we're going to go for our trigger finger and maybe we're going to get some finger pain, or we go for the full open palm, which does test if our shoulders are properly engaged and we're strong enough, but doesn't really provide us with a lot of hand grip. The most important thing is that we are teaching to the people who are in front of us, that we have lots of options on the table, and that we understand if our students actually just have the prerequisites of what we're asking them to do. This is going to get our students to their goals so much more quickly.